Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. Hello, it is time for a solo podcast. So it's just me again today, and it's nice to be here. I had planned to do this last week, but my plans were scuppered a little bit because my dear mother broke her hip. And if there's one thing that I have hoped would not happen to my dear 8-year-old mother, is that she would break her hip. It's been tough. It's been tough so far. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a long road to recovery. She's all right. She's had surgery. Bless her, she didn't do it in either her hometown or my hometown. Nothing like complicating matters. She was travelling at the time when she fell. And so she's somewhere that's not particularly convenient for either of us. But there you go. So my world has shifted a bit again. I'm having to reassess things. It's classic midlife territory, isn't it? When we have to pivot, I suppose, in the way we interact with our older loved ones. And we have to think in terms of, greater caring responsibilities, etc., etc. So I'm not really sure how this is all going to pan out yet. Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting time. It feels like all the balls are in the air at the moment, and I'm really struggling to catch them all. But anyway, I thought I would share that with you just to, it's not all sweetness and light in the garden. I'm really mixing my metaphors here, aren't I? But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. And I think as we get older, we have to face these things more. And I may have mentioned on a podcast before, but I confirmed it. But I've actually started a master's in gerontology. So the timing's terrible because I've got my business to run and books to write and podcasts to record, doing a master's in gerontology. And then this has happened with my mum. But as I have read recently, I know this is going to sound really self-serving. I hope it doesn't. But I'm trying to apply the question of what can I learn from this? And actually, it's weird how things come together. Because here I am studying gerontology, the study of aging, and I'm living gerontology. Last week I was in this other place and going to the hospital every day and grappling with huge gerontology issues. It's just fascinating, really, that things have kind of come together like this for me. And one of the things I'm learning through the gerontology course and through what's happened to my mum is the fact that when we talk about, successful aging, what do we mean? And successful aging, it's fraught with difficulties as a word, as a way of viewing aging, because as Ashton Applewhite says, if we wake up, we're aging successfully. And I like that approach. But I also know, there are ways that we can look after ourselves that mean we have a better chance of aging well or living longer in health. But what I'm learning, and actually what is being rammed down my throat, is that we have to find strategies to cope with loss as we age. Because people will die, loved ones will die, we will lose things, we will lose abilities, we will lose just things that we were able to do in the past. We won't be able to do them so well anymore. I've actually stopped drinking, for example, because my body couldn't do drinking anymore. This is a bit of a crazy example because it's not exactly a loss. I actually feel it's a real gain. I've been over 100 days now with no booze. I'm loving it. It's brilliant. And actually having to cope with all this and not having to cope with processing alcohol, I think is doing my body a lot of favours. But we will have to change and cope with death and loss as we get older. And somehow we need to find strategies to enable that to not hurt us too much. And I'm working this out. I don't have any answers, but it's things that I'm thinking about. And I'm reading a very good book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, which was recommended by one of my lecturers. And it's about the over-medicalisation of later life and end of life. And you know how I really don't agree with the over-medicalisation of menopause. And it's really interesting to see that we need to think more creatively about how people age to enable them to age as they want to age. The research shows that most people want to age in place. They want to die at home, for example. They don't want to go into institutional living. And yet we don't have a setup to enable older people to do that very well. So there's lots of things to learn for me, and there are lots of ideas that are probably going to turn into new passions. I've wanted to transform life for midlife women, and I want to transform the way that we all age. It's fascinating. Anyway, there you go. So this month, I'm recording this at the end of World Menopause Month. Let's go back just to menopause a little bit. My last solo podcast was a real rant about menopause and getting the facts straight. So I'm not going to go over that again too much, although I will just slightly because I can't resist it. There's been various events and demonstrations outside the UK Parliament again, which is all very worthy. I'm allowed to say that. But again, it's the messages, it's HRT or bust. It's nothing about diet and fitness and stress management. You know, these things are, and processed food and toxins, and nobody talks about these things. So I had a little rant on Instagram. You can go and have a search on that if you want to have a giggle. But there was an all-party parliamentary group report, and I say in my rant, you know, I love, as I said in the last solo podcast, I love that we're talking more about menopause, but we're saying the wrong things, we're still saying the wrong things. And in this all-party parliamentary group report, they again quoted that almost 1 million women, or 900,000 women, have left work because of menopausal symptoms. And I have debunked that. You know, I've written my post about that, which you'll find on magnificentmidlife.com in my blog, and it's also on themuttonclub.com in the menopause category. It's just a load of bollocks. Actually, I say bollocks quite a lot in my rant on Instagram, because it is. And yet it keeps getting quoted over and over and over again. And this week it was quoted in Forbes magazine online, talking about menopause and saying that in the UK nearly 1 million women have left work because of menopause symptoms. And it's just not true. Growl, growl, growl. But this is me, as I said in my rant, this is me channeling my menopausal rage, or rather my post-menopausal rage, in a good way, because I'm not going to shut up about this. I think it's really important. Because if we don't have the right data, if it's not true, and it is actually not just a bit fudged, but completely fudged, then what can we trust? What can we trust about the information we're being given? Yesterday, I organised what I called a positive menopause lunch. We're going to come up with a better name for ourselves. But it was a group of women who share some of my concerns about how we're misleading women about what menopause is or isn't, how we're talking about causation when actually it's correlation and there may be no causation link at all. for example, when we're talking about menopause and suicide, how we are scaring younger women instead of just educating them about how they can transition well through menopause and what wonderful things await them on the other side of menopause. And how HRT is this panacea instead of encouraging women to look at their diet and their lifestyle and their stress management and their alcohol intake and their caffeine intake and all of it, and processed foods and their weight and all of this stuff. So we had a good chat about that and watch this space to see what we get up to. So that was quite exciting. It was really nice actually to talk to some people who share my concerns about what's going on. So I'm just going to do a quick run through now of some of the episodes from this current season. And it's a cracker of a season as usual. Started off with Dr. Liz O'Riordan talking about breast cancer and menopause, and we got into some serious myth busting there because she shares my concerns about HRT being now promoted to women who've had breast cancer who are alternatively being told that they cannot have HRT. But again, they're being told that if they don't have HRT, then they're at higher risk of Alzheimer's, heart disease, osteoporosis, depression, early death even. And I've said this many, many times. And Dr. Liz O'Riordan is super worried about this too. She wants people to understand what the alternatives are, both medical alternatives and non-medical, but also just to have much more balance in the conversation. Then we had Choosing to Live in the Arctic with Laura Galloway, and she's the author of Dodgy, 6 years in the Arctic tundra. And she had a midlife reinvention and a half when she fell in love with a reindeer herder and decided to follow him across the world and live in the Arctic. It's very quickly found out in the book, so it's not a spoiler alert. The reindeer herder didn't last, but her time in the Arctic did. She spent 6 years there, and it's a beautiful book. It's a fantastic conversation, just really inspiring about how you can make a different life for yourself. Then we had Katie Phillips talking about how to find your soulmate, episode 123. And that's quite fun if you want to know my personal story about finding love in midlife online, which I managed to do. And Katie is a breath of fresh air. And she, obviously, we know this, don't we, really, if we think about it, but being able to find someone to love is all about loving yourself. And when you can love yourself, you can find the love that you deserve. Then I had a very interesting and wide-ranging conversation with Dawn Maria France, who is an award-winning journalist and editor-in-chief of Yorkshire Women's Life magazine. And we talked about diversity, equality, being a mature woman, being childless by choice, but still deciding to write children's literature, and mental health, especially in the Black and Brown community. We talked about all sorts of things, actually. So that's a really fun conversation. And then the one just before this, which actually couldn't have been more timely for me, was Carolyn Burrell, who's the author of Walking with Faye, talking about caring for a loved one with dementia. Dementia is not something in my life currently, but as older people get a bit older, and if they have a lot of stress in their lives, like breaking their hip and being in hospital, they can get a bit muddled and confused. And we have to change how we interact with people, and we need to accommodate them and dig deep. And this episode with Carolyn is full of her personal experiences of how to care for her mother, who did succumb to dementia, and it was a very difficult road. But Carolyn learned a lot along the way and wanted to share that. And it's relevant whether or not dementia is in your life. You know, it is just superb about how to be in any relationship, actually. And we talk about, you know, the essence of it. You know, do you want to be happy or right? Do you have to be right? And sometimes being right isn't going to make you happy. Those are the episodes so far, and we've got some great ones coming up as well, which I'm not going to tell you about now. So that is exciting too. What else have I been up to? I've been on the Diversity podcast talking about menopause and age diversity with Julia Streets. Ageism is something that drives me, hence why I'm trying to move into the study of gerontology. I was also in Sustainability magazine talking about ageism as being still a socially acceptable prejudice. And I really do believe that gendered ageism is at the root of the issues for so many older women. It's not just about menopause in the workplace, it's about gendered ageism. And we need to sort that out as well as just, well, hopefully not just ticking the menopause box. I launched my mentoring program as an online course. So Revitalize Self-Study it is still a live program which happens 3 times a year usually, but it is now a course. So you can actually go and buy my course. It's in 6 modules and it's super cool, even if I say so myself. I know that this has a dramatic impact on women. I hope you'll go and check it out. It's really cool. It's very good. So go and have a look at magnificentmidlife.com/revitalize-self-study. And I want to remind you as well to look at my book. I sometimes think people don't really understand what my book is about. So I thought maybe I'd just tell you quickly what it is about. It's called Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Menopause is a big part of it, but it's only a small big part of it, if that makes sense. So part 1 is about crisis, what crisis? It's about unpicking old narratives. And that's where I look at new perspectives on midlife, challenging the established norms about aging, finding inspiration for changing beliefs, like in other cultures. The fact that ageism is such a peculiarly Anglo thing, and I talk about why that is. And then rebranding menopause and talking about, the negativity surrounding menopause. Then part 2 is about embracing menopause and managing the transition with ease. So that's everything I know about how you can actually manage your menopause transition. And then part 3, we go off on a completely different tangent. And that is all about looking forward. It's about crafting the future of your dreams. So that's where I help you to look into building long-term resilience in body and mind so that you can do everything you might want to do without getting burnt out. We explore possibilities for your future. We get honest about life now, and we do an audit and we work out, what's going on, what do you need to deal with. Things like evaluating your relationships, dealing with unresolved issues. And then finally, you get to create your magnificent midlife plan. So this is kind of like the written version of my live and now self-study Revitalize program. So there are many ways to do this kind of work. And I really believe that it's incredibly powerful work to do in midlife. I think that's one of the gifts of midlife. That's what makes midlife magnificent. Either get the book or go and have a look at the course or come and join me on the next live round of Revitalize, whatever. But don't sit back and just think life's okay, this is the way it's going to be, and I'm exhausted and I haven't got the energy to do this. Because we can all find the energy. That's why it's called Revitalize, because the program starts with getting you revitalized. It's hopefully going to give you a massive midlife reboot. That is the plan. That is the strategy. These are just some of the things I've been pondering. We may face difficulties in midlife. It may be one of those stages of life that is particularly difficult. But I think out of difficulty can come great things. And that's why I like to call it Magnificent Midlife, because I think we are evolving into the very best selves. We are becoming, as David Bowie said, who we were always supposed to be. So if you're going through a rough time, hang on in there. If you're going through a good time, make the very most of it. and stay magnificent. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.